morning. Stacey and I are here in Winona Lake, Indiana on a cool fall day, almost wintertime here. But thanks for joining us today. We're excited to be able to talk about some parenting issues. We're in the thick of the holiday fun with our five adopted and 7 kids.
Well, and I will be honest, I just cleaned up half a gallon of milk that got spilled at the kitchen table. So I know that you guys all can probably relate to the chaos and the fun. And so we have so much stuff to cover today, and we want to get started on time. That's always super important to us. And really, as we're teaching, we'll be listening because, like I said, we are very much in the thick of things with our kids right now. And, so much of it has to do with holiday, but a lot of it also has to do with being in this pandemic. And, we've got kids that are in school and kids that are contact traced or kids that are quarantined. So it's just been this mess of who's in this week, who's out this week, and all the chaos that entails. And so we're just going to dive right in and really start talking about what we are dealing with and some of the science behind how we can better support our kids at home. So like Darren said, we have 7 kids and 5 of our children are adopted. And so, we both have backgrounds. Darren's a teacher. I'm a former teacher. I'm now an RN that works in mental health. And then we've read all the books and gone to all the studies and done all the things. But really what's equipped us is having fostered and parented for over 15, 16 years. And so it's all a blur. But it's really what's born out in our home and what we recognize, not just in our kids, but in ourselves and how we parent. And so we will just jump right in. And this training today is a training that we do internationally. And so we wanted people to kind of see what Lost Sparrows does to support foster care all around the world, and also to support teachers all around the world. Because, the United States is ahead of the game in a lot of ways with foster care and adoption. But a kid in the US is the same as a kid in Bulgaria, is the same as a child in Russia, is the same as a child in Kyrgyzstan or wherever, who's dealing with early childhood trauma, and the brain is the same. And so what we're going to talk about today is, like I said, training that we actually do around the world to support foster families who don't have the same resources that we have here.
So this is a bit of a challenge for us because there's so many things to talk about with our kids, and so I'm not sure why it's doing that. Sorry. I want to let you know that this is where we're going to go. We're going to talk about trauma and what trauma is. We're going to talk about stress, how it affects us and how it affects our kids, attachment, attunement, caregiver burnout, block trust, and block care. Some issues that this time of year during the holidays tend to really creep up a lot. And so hopefully it'll be relevant to all of us.
And I love that my husband put this slide in because it shows like the high school teacher in him that's like, and today, are you going to tell us what state standards will be?
Yeah, we have learner objectives. That's what we have to deal with.
So there will be a quiz at the end, but I'm going to duck out. But you guys, I hope you do well on it.
Well, I thought everybody would want to know what we were going to talk about.
I think it's good. Okay. So you guys, one of the things that was super interesting to me is when we look at like a working definition of trauma, trauma is any stressful event that's prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable. So like what's interesting to me about this is that I feel like that matches the definition of pandemic, a stressful event that is prolonged, unpredictable, and for many overwhelming. And I don't know how much you guys are watching the news or or whether you are just like, I'm done, but it's like every week something new. Like this week it's, oh my gosh, numbers are skyrocketing and wear your mask. And then next week it's going to be, oh, numbers are declining. We're starting to get back out into society. And it just seems to be this unpredictable and prolonged event that we have no control over. And so as adults, I feel like right now we are living in what I think is a very traumatic time. And we can't negate the effects that this is having on us. And that then trickles down into how we're able to co-regulate our kids in our home, because our kids are going to school, and or if they're home with us, they're actually feeding off of us. And so I think it's interesting when we think about this period of time, and how many months are we going on now with this? 7,
8, 9 months.
8 months. I don't even know. It's like interminable. But I think it's really important, like, that we think about that we are legitimately living trauma. And I'm sure there are times that you maybe see this in yourself. Do you notice maybe you have a thinner emotional margin, right? That's definitely me. And I'm going to be honest, Darren and I got in a little bit of a like, no, I don't want that chair. Yes, I want that chair. You know, I mean, it's just that living on edge a little bit. And I think it's really important that we maybe identify that pandemic is something that is possibly causing some of this.
Last year, teaching at the high school, I taught anatomy and physiology with some really upper level students, really, really smart and motivated kids. And we had conversations to talk about stress. This is prior to the COVID event. And so when we would talk about stress, I was really shocked that our kids, they couldn't hardly have a conversation about stress because they couldn't identify it very well in themselves. They couldn't identify a relief for their stress. They couldn't tell me, well, when I feel stressed, this is what I do to make myself feel better. They couldn't do those. I was shocked. And so we would have conversations. We would do things. I tried to model for them ways to deal with their stress. And I think it was a powerful thing for them. And so now we move into this pandemic, and it's so challenging because so many relationships are lost because we're so isolated. We're stuck at home. You know, restaurants, we're not going out to restaurants like we used to. We're not going to concerts and fun events. And so life just becomes kind of mundane and overwhelming. So if it's that for us, it must be even more for our kids and our students. So a lot of parents, we see a lot of stuff online on social media, and we get messages every day from parents who are just really, really struggling. So if you feel that way right now, you are absolutely not alone. There are a lot of people that are really going through some challenging times because of our current pandemic.
Well, and this is really interesting to me. So when Darren was working with his high school students, he would talk about, and we're going to do this, it's a stress wheel in a minute that we're going to have you fill in, but I would encourage you with your upper level kids to do this wheel with them. But when he asked kids like, wow, when you're feeling stressed, what do you do? Like, no students were raising their hand. And these are, like I said, upper level, secondary or high school students. And so finally a student was like, yoga. And so then they're all like, yeah, yoga. And he goes, okay, well, how many of you do yoga? None of them were doing yoga. They just knew that would maybe be something someone would do. And so I think while we're going through this stress wheel with you and we're talking about some of the tools for us, I think this would be huge to do with your kids as well, because I think that's not something that's taught in school. And Darren's class was very, I don't know, it's not something that's typically taught, but he recognized how much stress affected his students. So he would teach lessons and curriculum around stress. And so let's go ahead and we'll move forward to the next slide. And you guys, we're going to use the chat bar on this because I don't want to just sit and talk at you. I want to hear your answers as well. I'm going to have you look at this stress wheel.
Sorry, we'll get there.
And we're going to start with the body. Okay, I want you in the chat bar to tell me what happens in your body when you are stressed out. Okay, and I will start, and I'm going to type in the chat bar. For me, I tend to get super tight neck muscles. Tense. Juliana says tense.
Those of us that work with kids in school and school nurses, they could probably fill this out pretty quick because kids go to the nurse all the time because of stress, but they identify it as my body feels not right.
And the top two things that kids will talk to a school nurse about is stomach ache and headache.
Yeah, increased heart rate. Isn't that weird that subconsciously we recognize that?
Oh, this is another thing I notice when I'm stressed out. I'll get like skin irritations. Awesome. All right, we're going to move over to the mind. What is happening in your mind when you're stressed out? here.
Yeah.
Oh, looping anxious thoughts. I do that too.
Yeah, and those negative thoughts, that is a really tough one. We get
Mhm.
stuck in that network in our mind that just talks to us and tells us all that negative stuff.
I'm going to write this for Darren. Negativity.
Yeah, and I think guys and girls are a little different this way, whether you have boys or you have girls or in a marriage, a husband and wife. We tend to deal with that stress differently. And guys, you just they might keep it inside a little bit more. Girls tend to, I think, to be more free to talk about it. But they still have the same feelings, and that negativity is one that I know I have to deal with. Sometimes you just get so soured. Not good. Anxious, that's a good one too.
Okay, so let's go to behavior. What behaviors are you seeing in yourself or in your children? I guess we're gonna stick to self. What behaviors do you see in yourself when you are overwhelmed by stress? Irritable, yep. Oh my gosh, Joy. So the unable to complete tasks, I swear I'll be like doing laundry and suddenly I'm in the kitchen holding, a pair of scissors and I don't remember how I got there. So
Yeah, and Julianne said poor food choices, and I put eating an entire box of Oreos, right? Like we self-medicate when we don't feel good and we're stressed, we do things to make ourselves feel better. And I know like stress eating is a real thing. Yeah, being quick to react. Chocolate, yeah, absolutely. The science proves out that chocolate does make it lights up that reward center in the brain pretty strong.
Oh, hey, Dragana. Sorry, I just saw Dragana.
And yeah,
she's a friend from Bosnia. So welcome, Bosnia.
Yeah, and Bruce Perry, who's a pretty amazing scientist, deals in this trauma stuff. He talks a lot about how when we're stressed, we're drawn to sweet and fatty foods. Those are where we go. And so people like fast food, cookies and sugar and all those things that help us overcome that those negative hormones.
All right, we're going to do the last one. And this tends to be the hardest part of the wheel to fill in. What are your emotions like when you're stressed? Where are your emotions? What are you feeling when you're stressed?
Yeah, angry, sad, get angry more quickly. Absolutely right. That's what we call a thin emotional margin. Frustration, impatient. Yeah, those are absolutely right.
So what's really interesting about this stress wheel is when I work on this stress wheel with kids, especially high school students, they really struggle to identify the emotion behind stress. And so that's why I think this would be really good if you have a junior high or a high school student to do this with them, because especially children from trauma don't even recognize emotions and things within themselves. And so when you can actually put it on paper in black and white and talk about it, you're actually doing what we call name it to tame it, which is naming what's happening in order for them to understand, and then what we call tame it or actually draw it in. And so when you look at this, hopefully you're seeing, wow, we all kind of are doing some of the same things.
And I want to say that I think this is the important thing on this. If you can't relate, right? So we can all recognize those effects of stress. If a kid doesn't have the ability to say that's coming from stress, then they have these feelings on the inside that they don't know where they're coming from. And that is going to cause more stress because, why do I feel sick? Why do I feel so not normal? Why am I angry all the time? And you ask kids and they go, I don't know. I'm just angry. I'm just, like they just don't recognize it. And so when you can help them to recognize that that's what stress does in our bodies, well, then they can realize it's not them. It's not that they are just messed up. It's that they're reacting to what's happening. And so then you can develop strategies, right? It's like that first recognition of what the problem is before we can move forward into a solution. So if you talk through these things with stress with your kids, they might say, yeah, that is how I feel. And then you can go, okay, what do we do next? How do we alleviate the stress? And as parents, I think all of us can name some things that we can do with our kids to help overcome that stress, right? Like we can go for walks, we can get physical exercise. Again, that's going to stimulate really good hormones, serotonin and oxytocin, time together, things like that. Playing games as a family, sitting around the dinner table talking, making sure, tucking your kids in at night, reading them a book. Just time with them is going to be really important for them to help them to overcome the stress, right? So we don't need to really focus on the stress. We need to focus on the cure. The stress is going to be there, but the cure is going to help overcome that. And so we spend time in relational things, taking walks and conversating or doing art projects, right? Those right brain stimulating things, listening to music. All of those things are going to help your kids, just their brain to be calm, and then they'll be able to handle the stress a lot better.
The other thing I want to point out when we look at this, we know that the brain has 3 parts, right? There's a lower part of the brain, the middle, and the upper. And the lower part is that basement of the brain that's formulated when children are very young, up to about the age of 2. That's all survival brain. The middle part of the brain is that emotional seat, or that limbic system. And that's where all we see our toddlers, right? Like we have a little girl that's our youngest, and we call her the Kraken, because she lives out of that emotional part of her brain. Okay. And then the upper part of the brain is your thinking brain. When you look at this wheel, all of the things that you're seeing happening in your body, mind, behavior, and emotions, that is all basement of the brain. Okay. That's all basement of your brain. So you're not using your thinking brain when you are stressed out. So I want you to keep that in your head, because I want you to recognize that when we're talking about behaviors in our kids, all this that we see is all basement of the brain. It is not thinking brain.
And what that means is it's subconscious, right? It's not conscious. We tend to operate on automatic responses rather than well thought out and executed in actions, right? So when our thinking brain's online, we plan steps ahead. We have good executive functioning skills. Our working memory is working like it should. So we're so much more capable. And then when stress puts us into that basement of the brain, now we're operating out of emotions and reactions that we shouldn't do, right? We do things and we afterwards go, man, that was a dumb thing to do. But it was because we just kind of weren't in our right mind, as we say. So that's why the stress thing is just so critical for helping our kids to come out of that, so that they can actually use their thinking brain.
Right, because none of you woke up and thought, oh man, today I'm going to have like impaired judgment and muddled thinking and make super hasty decisions, and I'm going to drink more and also eat really bad and feel really irritable, and I hope I have like none of us wake up and say that. Well, guess what? Our kids don't wake up and say that either. Okay, so it's important to think that, because our kids don't wake up thinking that either.
So I just real quick want to add on to this slide. Like if we had you in the chat bar again, type in like, what do you do to alleviate your stress? Like what's a positive thing that you can do for yourself to alleviate stress? Because like for Stacey, she likes to go for a run. She gets a physical exercise. For her is the answer. It makes her feel so much better about like everything. For some people, it's sitting on the couch, putting a blanket over them and reading a book. And that's totally fine too. Like all of us have ways of coping with our stress. We just need to recognize we need to do them more, right? In the pandemic, it's so hard because some of the things we would do to alleviate our stress, we can't go do them, right? It's not safe, or we can't be in groups of people. So if you are struggling to think of something that you do that's constructive and healthy to help alleviate stress, then that's a place you can recognize you need to put some thought into. And then same with your kids. Your kids need those activities, right? Like I know we have a teenager that's an adolescent that wants to just watch TV 24 hours a day. Like that's his way of handling stress, is to just turn into a vegetable on the couch. And that's not healthy for him. We have to make him turn that TV off and do other things, play games, read books, go outside and ride his bike. Yeah, listening to music, that's a powerful one. Absolutely. And we just got to make sure if it's our kids that they're listening to appropriate and to good music. Our kids at the high school, sometimes I would ask to listen to what they were listening to in their, they always have in those AirPods. And I was sometimes really shocked at what I would hear coming through there. So we want to make sure they listen to good music.
So we threw this slide in because I think sometimes, especially as parents, we're just not honest. And we always laugh about this slide because if Darren said, "Hey, how was your day?" and I said, "It was fine," do you think it was really fine?
Red lights are flashing in my brain.
I'm like, "No, really, I'm fine." So I think like right now, I don't feel fine. Like, honestly, I don't feel fine because nothing's the same. A lot of things seem stressful. My kids are acting out right now. Like, and I think it's important that we're all honest. Like, we are honest with where we're at and what we're feeling, because when we're not and we just keep muddling through and keep pushing through, then we're not recognizing, okay, if wow, there's an issue right now.
I would just say too, like, hopefully all of us have somebody we can talk to and be honest with, because this is not an easy thing to do sometimes, but hopefully you have somebody you can talk with.
So we're going to jump in a little bit to understanding what we call attachment and attunement, and what everyone calls attachment and attunement. But what we want to really jump into is really understanding what's kind of happening right now and when we're dealing with behaviors in kids and where that stems from. And especially when we were working with kids from hard places, we talk a lot about attachment issues. Well, the reality is that we want to teach you guys to be attunement parents, not attachment parents, because all of us have, if you are alive today, you have some sort of attachment. You have to be attached in some way to a caregiver in order to live. So I think statistically, 55% of adults have an insecure attachment or a poor attachment as children, which actually matches our adult divorce rate. Okay. And so when we really drill down into understanding psychiatric disorders and mental health disorders, we can say that our lack of ability to calm ourselves down is the fundamental mechanism behind all of those. So when I am working with adults who are struggling with mental health issues or psychiatric disorders, when we super drill it down, the mechanism behind is that they're not able to calm themselves down. And that ability to calm ourselves down comes from attachment, which is really heavy and crazy to think about, but we can even branch out from that. When we branch out from psychiatric disorders or mental health disorders and we look at substance use issues, or we look at cutting, or we look at suicidal ideation, or we look at any of the things that are happening in the adult world or the juvenile world that are scary behaviors, that's the fundamental mechanism behind it, is the inability to calm ourselves down. And so we're reaching out for something else to help us feel okay.
So let's break this down a little bit. Affect dysregulation. That's not a term used in very, very often in everyday conversation, but you'll hear scientists use that term, right? And psychiatrists. So your affect is your emotional state, right? Your affect is that whether you feel calm, happy, sad, like, and then the dysregulation is you can't control it. It's controlling you. So instead of you, kind of logically being able to override your emotions and tell your emotions, I understand that I'm angry, but I also know I don't really need to be angry and I have ways of dealing with it. Affect dysregulation is my emotions are in charge of my thinking brain and I can't stop them. It's like that snowball effect that's just going out of control. So then the second thing I need to say about this, attachment starts when we're kids, right? So if we have trouble with this issue, it's probably not our fault. It's probably no, not always, but this is likely to be because of the relationships and issues maybe we had when we were kids. If you look at the ACEs study, it shows a lot of these same things. They proved out that so many attachment issues lead to other issues when we are adults. And so
including mental health.
Yeah, and when we look at our kids, if they're having these issues where instead of thinking brain controlling emotions, it's the other way around and the emotions are controlling everything, we have to focus on that. And we have to understand that the cure is going to be probably in dealing with the attachment problems, right? So here's a challenge for us. We get asked every day by lots and lots of parents, how do I handle with my kid who's doing this? You know, they're lying, they're hoarding food, or they're running away, or like they're just all these behaviors. And they say, how do we deal with that? That's an impossible question for Stacey and I to answer because we don't know your kids, right? Without delving into tons and tons of history of where those behaviors are coming from. So as a baseline for all of us, this is what we need to focus on. Whatever the behavior is, we need to look at this first for the cure.
Right. And so one thing I want to say before we move on, because I don't want anyone to say, well, wow, my sister is schizophrenic, or I have, severe depression, or those things. I must not have attached to my mom. That is not necessarily true. There are chemical imbalances. All right. There are chemical imbalances that occur within the brain, but I want us to understand, especially when we're dealing in the pediatric or the world of children, that we have to know that the cause. We can't, there's no cure unless we look back and we look at the cause, especially working with children from hard places. And when I'm in the jail working with inmates, I'm going to tell you that 9 out of 10 of them have childhoods that would blow your mind, that they don't even like, that are so dysfunctional and so scary and so hard that no wonder they're struggling with addiction. No wonder they're struggling with some of the mental health things they're struggling with. And so that's why I want us to connect the idea that, you know what, Darren and I, we're teachers. We could tell you how to get rid of a behavior. I could tell you, yep, do this, 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 and this, and I could help you extinguish a behavior today. But the problem with that is I didn't actually get rid of the underlying issue. I didn't help you fix what was causing the behavior. And so as a nurse, I would look at that as, oh, you came to me and you have a really bad splinter deep in your skin and it's festered and it's this big sore on your arm. Well, what if I was going to extinguish a behavior, I would just cover that with a pretty white bandage and be like, dude, looks good, you're fine. Did I actually fix the underlying? Nope. The underlying is the painful part where you're going to have to dig in and figure out what is causing the body to respond the way it's responding. And it's not just covering it with a white bandage. That doesn't work. Oops, sorry. As we go through this, if you have questions, you guys need to throw them to the chat bar.
Yeah, we'll try to answer questions as we go if we have time, or if they're appropriate questions at the time. Sometimes we get asked questions that are not real simple to answer, but we'll do the best we can.
So we're going to breeze a little bit through some of the attachment stuff, just because I need you to really understand the whole idea of attachment so we can explain blocked care and blocked trust. So when we look at the attachment process, it begins in utero. So attachment begins in utero. And so that's by basically a baby has a need, and that need is met by the caregiver or the mother. And so when we think about a baby, once they're born, the baby cries. Mom hears the baby cry and meets the child's need, and then the child is comforted. And so that's that circle of attachment that we see occurring. And it happens thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Okay, and that is building the very foundation of the brain. And that's how a child is able to be regulated in the world, because they look to that parent or caregiver to meet those needs. So what is important about attachment is that a child's ability to be attached and attuned to their parent or caregiver is the primary means by which they trust others. They develop a conscience. They learn to get along with others, and they develop positive self-esteem. This happens before the age of 3. Okay, so when we are looking at the basement of the brain and attachment is in utero to about the age of 2. Okay. And so when we are looking at how a child learns to trust the world, have a conscience, learn to get along, all those things. And then what we say, have the inner narrative that says, I am loved, I am worthy, I am safe. That is all foundationally built before the age of 2.
You know, in studies that they've done on sociopathy, you know, you look at people who became mass murderers, or who, you know, guys like Jeffrey Dahmer is the one I know that they looked at. There are lots of those guys who we just, they're monsters. And so when you study, like, how did they get to that point, and there's really one place where they all share something in common, and it comes back to what happened to them in their childhood. So you know, some of us with adopted kids, or if we're fostering, we don't always know what happened with our kids in their history, but we can see the symptoms and know that there were issues here. And obviously any kid who's been removed from their home or been institutionalized is going to have some real problems with these things. So again, we're just trying to kind of lay that foundation of where behaviors come from for our kids as they go through life.
And so kids that have come from hard places, or kids that maybe had a lot of medical trauma as children, or had insecure attachments early on, their internal narrative is telling them, I'm not lovable. The world is not safe. I cannot trust people. So their brain is always telling them that the world isn't safe, and they survive because they are going to survive themselves. And so when you're dealing in that narrative, we're going to talk about how we help our kids who have that narrative. Okay, because we have to recognize that our love, and I'm sure many of you can't have realized this, your love's not fixing this. Okay, love doesn't fix an altered brain. Instead, we're giving our kids the tools to be able to be successful in the world and start changing that inner narrative to one that says, you know what, no, I am lovable and I am worthy. Okay, we can do that, but we can't fix an altered brain. And so when we look at attachment, what I want to jump into is what I call attunement parenting, because attachment parenting, there's an emotional bond, but really it's just seeing the need and meeting it over and over again. Okay, but what I want to talk about today is attunement. And attunement, the best way to think about it is, you know, an infant crying and the mom goes, oh, that's the hungry cry. That's the scared cry. Okay. Attunement is actually when you tune in and know your child's need when they express that need through crying or behavior. And that's the goal in parenting, is to be attuned to our kids and their history, to be able to say, oh, that cry of behavior is the scared cry of behavior, or, oh, that's a trauma-versary trigger, or any of those things we're looking at. So attunement is the way that you actually step into your child's shoe and know what's wrong, even though they can't articulate it. Now, I'm going to read this next slide, and I know it's hugely large, but I feel like there was nothing I wanted to cut out, because it's so important to understand, because this really explains what emotional attunement is. Emotional attunement should begin in infancy with a mother or primary caregiver following the baby's emotional cues. Babies are born feeling deep emotions, but lack the ability to regulate or manage the intensity and duration of those emotions. Without the monitoring help of mother, babies are engulfed by their emotional states, including those of fear, excitement, and sadness. However, when mother is able to tune in, pay attention to these emotions, and respond accordingly, she communicates to the baby that she is in sync, understands what the baby is doing, feeling, and thinking. This allows a baby to feel safe and secure. This tuning in assists brain development, and over time teaches the baby how to self-regulate, make sense of their emotions, and thus communicate his or her needs. It is a mother's gift to her child, an emotional roadmap to decipher what they are feeling. If a child's feelings are continually discounted, ignored, or reprimanded, they will not know how to soothe, respond, or express those emotions in adulthood. To me, this is so profound, because if you take the baby out of this and put in the older child, we will see how our kids get engulfed by emotional states. And they're literally not able to differentiate between something that's exciting and something that's fearful. It triggers a response that's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so that's why during holidays or when you're going to go do something cool and exciting, it looks like your child's maybe trying to sabotage things. They're not. They're actually not differentiating those emotional states, and they're becoming engulfed in them. Well, our ability to handle emotional states was a gift from our mother. Our mother was able to attune and help us to self-soothe. I'm going to add to that.
I want to focus on one sentence in there for a second. The sentence that says, tuning in assists brain development and over time teaches a baby how to self-regulate, right? So when we tune in, when we are attuned to our children, this is our way to truly change a child's brain, right? This is hopefully permanent changes. The hard thing here is it takes lots and lots of time, and it takes lots and lots of repetitions. We have to do this over and over again. So when we tune in, we are helping connections be made inside our kids' brains, right? So, right, there's neurons, the brain cells, but they're there, and they're not going to get more of them hardly over their lifespan. Once we're born, we kind of have almost all of them. But what we can do is we can make connections. And so in our brains, when we think negative thoughts all the time, we're strengthening those negative connections, and we don't want to do that, right? We want to help our kids not have the negative connections. We want to replace those with positive connections and the feelings of self-worth, and then they learn to regulate themselves. So it's almost like we download that from ourselves to our babies. And so you really can change a brain in a child by continually attuning to their needs. Just remember, it takes a lot of time. You're not going to see the results overnight. But we got to, as parents, we're always in the long game, right? We're not playing for success today. We're playing for success over the next 25 years. So
I hope they move out by 25. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in this is, at some point, like, we decided, oh, that child's old enough to not act this way. So like when we hear a baby cry, we don't say, you quit crying, you stop that crying. Well, our children, when they have scary big behaviors, they're crying. And what we tend to do is say, you need to knock that off. You will not act that way, right? And so at some point, we stop actually recognizing behavior, which is crying out, as looking for, help me regulate myself. I'm expressing a need. I'm expressing a need. We stop seeing it that way. And so I think that's what we're hoping you see, is that you are giving your child an emotional roadmap because they're not navigating something well.
Let me give you an example. This just happened, sorry, in our home. Like, we have one of our teenagers doing something he wasn't supposed to do. Mom walks in the room, he comes out, and she's, what are you doing? And he automatically lies and says something that wasn't true. Well, it doesn't take, Sherlock Holmes to figure out that this kid's lying to us. And so then you ask the question, well, why did he lie? Right? Why did he lie? Well, number one, he was doing something that it wasn't even that bad. It was like, probably we would have, if you'd asked, we'd have said no, but he wasn't doing anything awful. But why does a child lie, right? So in this case, this young man that we adopted has a terrible history and was physically abused by the adults in his life. And so it makes sense that he would lie. Again, that's as a stress response, right? He got stressed out because he thought he was doing something he was going to get in trouble for. But what's the big deal if he gets in trouble? I mean, we're not abusive parents, but in his brain, the survival mode kicks in, and he knows that when he was a kid, he was physically abused. And so he wants to avoid that happening again. So he lies, so he avoids a consequence that he thinks, that his brain says could be absolutely life or death consequence. Not true. It's not true, right? We would discipline him. We would help him to understand lying's not good. but his basement of the brain is in control in that moment, because remember, stress turns off that thinking brain. So then he just reacts and he lies because he wants to avoid the punishment. And then you talk to him. So that's where then we just express to him that we can, that we can do better, that it bothers us and it hurts us when he lies to us, and that trust is really important. And we have those conversations. But I mean,
I didn't punish the lie.
Yeah.
When he lied to me, I didn't punish it because it was subconscious. I'm not going to punish trauma. I think that's important to understand. Do not punish trauma in your kids. When they've experienced trauma, you can't punish that.
Just differentiate in your mind between punishment and discipline. Discipline involves teaching. Punishment is just punishment. And so
punishment is for you.
Yeah, and punishment is focused on, like, right now, I want this behavior to stop. And a lot of times that's because it scares us, right? We wanted the behavior to stop, and this is what we talk with teachers about. But truly, if I want to help my child overcome it, then I have to go beyond that. I have to have conversations with him and share my emotions with him and help him understand why lying is not good, and all those sorts of conversations. So that's a long-term goal.
So this is one of my favorite slides. This is an example of attunement. Okay, so look at there's the child's behavior sending an adult a message. I love that it's a flaming ball, because that's pretty much always what it is, a flaming ball of something.
It's not a carrier pigeon, that's for sure.
So the child sends an adult a message. In that moment, as the adult, our job with attunement is to translate the behavior. Ignore the lie, ignore the aggression, ignore the whatever they're doing, the breaking of the lamp, or any of those things. Ignore that and translate the behavior and respond to the hidden feeling. Okay. And I think what's hard about this is we grew up, and I'm sure many of you grew up with understanding that defiance is not okay, and correct attitude, and you are, like, the way that I was taught to parent was not this way. Not that I didn't have a loving mother, but we have, working with kids that have the backgrounds that we have, we cannot punish them any more than they punish themselves. We cannot actually punish them any more than they punish themselves. Instead, we have to take those behaviors and respond to what is that hidden feeling. Because that's when Darren's saying the long game, that's the long game.
This is a real challenge. And this is another reason why Stacey and I, we can't always answer some of the questions we get about why kids do things. We like the term behavior detective. And as parents, we have to be behavior detectives. We have to intimately know our kids. And the reason why, and sometimes this is so challenging, and it's happened over thousands of times with our kids, and it's taught us this, that your kid has a behavior, and we look at the behavior and we go, well, you did that because of XYZ. And then when we sit and talk with them, they describe to us, no, I did that because of something else. And Stacey and I looked at each other like, man, I'd have never figured that out, right? Our foster kids would do things, and then later they would tell us, well, it was because of something. And so there's not a linear connection here, right? This is the hard part about the parenting. It doesn't go, it's not like it is connect the dots, but they're not in a straight line. So sometimes you get a behavior, you have to really work hard to decipher where that behavior came from. And so as an example, a kid comes home from school, and, at some point in the evening, something goes wrong. They get in a fight with their sibling. And then like siblings get in fights. We know this too much, but then you talk to your kid and you find out that at school, somebody was bullying him, and he was feeling awful and miserable on the inside because kids did something at school to him. But you can't know that. All you see is that they're getting in a fight at home. And so if you just yell at them to make them quit fighting and not try to decipher that underlying need of the pain from what happened at school, then you can't really help your kids grow out of those emotions. And I think that's what we're saying, is we just need to be behavior detectives.
A couple years ago, we we were teaching in another country, and I got asked to go to this orphanage. The director actually went to several members of our board and like, can Stacey come to and evaluate this girl? We think she has a mental health disorder. And this girl is stripping off her clothes and running naked through the orphanage, and she's screeching and doing all these things. And I'm laughing because I'm like, I'm supposed to go into this orphanage and diagnose. Like, it just seemed extreme to me that they were like, yeah, Stacey will come. So we finished training, and I hop in a car, and we drive to this orphanage, and we go in, and I sit with this girl who's 11 years old, and just petite little thing with a short bob. And she just looks like the weight of the world on her shoulders. And she sits by me and she draws me a picture, and we have a translator and I'm just talking with her. And she really is just a very typical 11-year-old who's lived in an institution, in the sense that, you know, she's a little delayed in some of her developmental skills and stuff, but very compliant and very, you know, interactive with me. And so I said, I want to meet with her caregivers. And they're like, what? And I'm like, let me meet with her caregivers. And so I met with 2 of the caregivers, and I started asking questions. I'm like, when did you start seeing this behavior? Because it was considered a new behavior for her. And they're like, oh, about 7 months ago. She started stripping off clothes and screaming through the orphanage about 7 months ago. And I said, okay, well, what happened 7 months ago? And they go, well, she had gone home with her mom because her mom had a brand new baby girl. And so she got to go home for a couple weeks, but then, you know, mom had to get on with life with her new baby. And so she brought her daughter and her sister back because she had a twin sister at the orphanage. And then right after that, her twin sister got placed into an adoptive home. Okay, you and I can absolutely, it's like, it's not rocket. You're like, what? Well, of course she's doing this. I would be doing the same thing as an adult who can process stuff. Of course she's doing this. And so then became this conversation of why she was doing that and how they needed to sit with her and help her process the abandonment and loss. But I think that you guys, if you were to talk out loud about the behaviors with your kids that are like these flaming balls, and then really start kind of going back in history and breaking it down, you would maybe have that moment of, oh, and these caregivers really cared about this girl. Okay, they really did. They just were so into the moment of every day and caring for all these kids that it never dawned on them to think that 7 months ago, oh my gosh, that was what happened, right? So I think that's a really important thing, is that we have the ability and time to step back and not deal in the behavior in that moment. Because there's something with parenting where we think we see a behavior that we have to like nip it in the bud right now. We got to fix this right now. There's no timeline. Okay, unless there's a safety concern in your house, someone's going to get injured. There's no timeline in having to deal with that flaming ball. You can get the flaming ball and sit with it for a while and translate it. Because translation is not moments. Translation is a long period of time trying to translate what your child's trying to tell you. Okay. So what we hope is that when you guys see that flaming ball with your kids, that you see it as an opportunity to connect. And that's the same as an infant. When an infant cries, that is the opportunity for a mother to meet the need of her baby and complete that cycle, right? Over and over again is this beautiful thing of like, your kids' emotions and scary behaviors can be an opportunity to connect. And we call those sliding door moments, okay? Because what typically happens in a sliding door moment is our kids open up their emotions and express something ugly towards us. I hate you. I'm stupid. You're stupid. Or I'm aggressive, or any of those things, right? And that's a sliding door moment where our kids are actually expressing an emotion. We have an opportunity in a sliding door moment to either shut the door by saying, you know what, you will not act that way, go to your room. You will not act that way, get out of my house right now. Okay, we have the opportunity in a sliding door moment to either shut the door and not deal and what we call punish, or we can step into the sliding door and sit with our kids in that hard and scary space. And that's the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing.
You know, Stacey and I, right before we moved to Indiana, we were fostering a sibling group of 3. And we had a newborn we picked up from the hospital. She was 2 days old. And we had her for about 6 months before we ended up moving. And that was a really tough thing for Stacey and I to go through. But one thing I think we all can recognize is when we are dealing with an infant or a baby, they cry. We tend to, now again, if we're regulated, now not everybody goes through this, but we will go and pick that baby up and we will talk to them and smile and they will smile back. And there's this incredible emotionally bonding connection that happens. And so it's like a two-way street, right? I'm caring and smiling and loving the baby, and the baby is cooing and smiling back. And so it feels really good. The problem is when we get to teenagers and it's not so much a two-way street anymore, right? Like now the behavior happens, which is the same as a baby crying sort of, and we have to go and meet that behavior, but it's probably a one-way street, right? We're not getting a lot of real positive feedback from our teenagers. In fact, we're getting the opposite. We're getting negativity, frustration, anger, and rage, and all that stuff. And it just becomes emotionally really draining to do that. But it is really important that we see it's the same sort of an idea that when we meet their needs and we use those opportunities to engage, because it's not about us. I think that going back to the attachment thing, how we respond when we see those behaviors, a lot of that's pre-programmed in us from the way we were raised when we were kids. And so we have to sort of recognize sometimes we have our own issues that we bring into these things, and then we need to overcome our own issues so we can help our kids with their issues.
So I think too, when you go back and you look at attunement with a baby, when they're crying, we actually name it to tame it with small children. We will pick up the crying kid and go, oh, you're wet, I need to change you. Or, oh, you're hungry, let's eat. We're actually talking out loud and telling our kids what they need. Oh, you're scared, mommy's gonna rock you, right? We actually give them words to that. And that's part of attunement with our older kids too. Now, I'm not gonna be like, oh, you're feeling scared. No, I mean, that's not, but it is when you step into those sliding door moments and you're in, and we're going to talk about what that looks like, called holding the space, but you're actually going to be mirroring and helping them understand their emotions to connect with them and helping them co-regulate, just like when kids were newborns, how we do that. So I just talked about when we mirror back things. When we look at attachment in infancy and attunement, eye gaze is huge. We didn't realize like how our youngest, who's from an orphanage, really struggled with eye gaze. And eye gaze actually, it is the mother, it's like a mirror to the soul almost. And there's all these amazing studies. You could look up studies on eye gaze and trauma. And it's really interesting to see how much that eye gaze is actually helping teach babies their significance and worth and love. And so we didn't realize that until we were working with my youngest daughter, and she used to tell us like, I'm not full, I need to fill up from mommy. And so whenever she would say that, she would sit in my lap and I would snuggle with her and we would do what's called, it was a fill up. And I decided, I had read some studies on eye gaze and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a 10-second fill up with eye gaze. And I told her, okay, well, I want to do a 10-second fill up with you. I'm going to have you sit in my lap and you're going to look in my eyes and we're going to count to 10. She legit could not hold eye contact for more than 2 seconds. Like I would be like 1, 2, and then all of a sudden her eyes are darting away. And so we've started doing that with her every day, where she'll get a 10-second, well, we actually call it a 5-second fill up now because she can't make it 10. And when we first were doing it, it moved to 3. And so I think that's really important when we're looking at attunement with our kids. Younger kids, you can do something like the fill up, but older kids, obviously that's awkward. I'm not going to do that with my teenager, but understanding that eye gaze when you're on their level is a huge and transformative thing for our kids.
what it looks like with a teenager. I do this with my teenagers, even the boys, right? Walk up to them, or like you can give them a hug, whatever. You almost like got to grab their face, and you got to look at them for a second, and just keep it brief. But you can live. Now everybody's kids are different. Some kids might not take to it, but I'll like put my hands on them and I'll look at them for a second, and just 1 or 2 seconds, and communicate something, say something, and then move on. And I think it helps them.
So part of mirroring back is something we called hold the space. You don't have that slide, right? So holding the space is one of the most important things that we can do in a sliding door moment. And what that looks like, and I'm just going to attach it to an event. So one of my kids came home from school and just punched his younger brother who's in a wheelchair, and shouted out an expletive and did all of these things. And in my, in my mind, and automatically I see that big flaming ball, and I just want to crush it, right? Oh my gosh, because that's kind of a trigger, and to see, a younger child hurt and all of that. Well, understanding what we understand now, I know that it's not about the flaming ball, and I need to interpret the flaming ball, because my kid is not interpreting it. He's just spewing it out. And so I sent all the kids into the kitchen to eat except for him. And I sat there and I held the space. And holding the space is where I'm holding that flaming ball, right? And I, in my mind, am being a behavior detective, thinking, did he get enough sleep last night? Did anything happen at school today? Did he have a test today? But in that moment, my kid is legit like pacing, all right? Because he's upset. And I'm sitting on the couch, open posture, and I'm just modeling breathing. And what you need to understand in that moment is what's going to happen is what's called transference, okay? Transference. And a good example of this is when you were a kid, and if your parent came home from work and they had a bad day, did they actually have to say they had a bad day, or could you tell when they walked in the door? Okay. My guess is you could tell when they walked in the door and you steered clear. Okay. But transference is the ability without articulation, you are able to basically co-regulate your kid, because you're always going to be stronger in that way. So when I'm just exuding a calm vibration or a calm nature, and I'm breathing, and in my mind, I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of ratcheting myself down a little bit, because I don't want to be triggered by him injuring someone. And I'm just breathing. And then after a few minutes, I might just say, do you want to come sit and talk with me? Typically he'll no, right? And I'm just waiting, right? And then at some point, he's going to come and sit by me. And that's holding the space. And you're just going to say something like, and remember, the brain is in survival in that moment. And you might just say, wow, looks like you had a really hard day. Okay, that's emotional validation. All right, I am validating that he gave an emotion, and I'm connecting in that emotion. And I'm telling you, I know this seems like backwards parenting, but this is how you get to what is underlying. Okay, so, and at that point, you are basically mirroring to them like, okay, I see your emotion and I'm holding it, and I'm going to help you interpret this. And then you're waiting and say, wow, did something happen today? Usually, no, right? And you wait. And again, you're holding the space. And holding the space isn't so much about your words as much as about your calming effect and in your body language.
This is what we mentioned earlier, seeing behaviors as an opportunity for connection, right? Like when your kid acts out, they are saying, I need help. And I know that, like Stacey said, that's kind of a backwards idea, but see it as a point of connection and opportunity. And holding the space is where you're going to communicate with your body and you're calm. You got to be calm, that you will de-escalate an angry kid or something. Like holding the space is just in essence saying, I'm not leaving you. I'm staying right here. And I know, you're throwing flaming balls at me, but I can handle it. I'm just going to stay right here until we can talk. And then you're teaching your kid that you are able to handle them, that you're able to handle the whole world, and that you're a safe place for them to come and land on. So it's a simple strategy, but it is pretty powerful.
Now, the good thing and the important thing to understand about this doesn't mean that there are not natural consequences for behavior. Okay. But what in this moment occurred is I found out what had happened prior and some other things where, okay, yeah, I understood why he reacted that way. He had been, like Darren had said, this was the same kind of incident where he had been hurt at school. And I just said, well, what's a bummer is you punched your younger brother. How can we fix that? Right? How can we fix that? And again, do you notice how I said we? Because I'm going to stand with my kid in things instead of do this. All right. Because I'm thinking long game. I'm thinking long game. And so it is okay, how can we fix this together? And we talk about that there are consequences for being aggressive. There are consequences for lying. There are consequences for those things that are natural that we're going to weather together. All right, let's
I think we want to maybe skip that one.
No, this one's really good.
Oh.
Okay. So one of the core beliefs that develops as a result of early childhood abandonment and trauma is that they do not matter and that they're unworthy of love. So remember we talked about that internal narrative that says, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, the world is not safe, all right? And so an example of this, I like this example because so often we see stuff with boys, like boys tend to be outward in aggression. Boys tend to be what we see as ADHD, or like 70% of boys react to trauma in an external outward way. Girls, 70% of girls react to trauma internalizing things. Okay. And so here's an example. 12-year-old girl has developed a hypervigilant sensitivity to what others want from her and tries to give it to them. This is called fawning. So we have fight or flight, which is what we tend to see in boys, freeze or fawn. Fawning is what a kid will do to, I'm going to become who you want me to be. I'm going to become who you want me to be able to be loved and accepted. So this girl at school, she is the teacher's pet and a straight A student. At home, she is helpful and compliant. However, she has recently began cutting in secret. Her hypervigilance towards acceptance and perfectionism is an adaptation to protect herself from others' disapproval and abandonment. But any approval that she receives is based on her inauthenticity, and then it serves to reenact the core belief that she is not worthy. Okay, so we're not going to answer this in the chat bar because we're going to run out of time. But what I wanted us to see is that we really are good at picking out the external things, but we also like the external behaviors, but we also need to be looking at the internalized behaviors. And so some of what I see in my kids is just this like perfectionism and this drive to be good all the time. And that can turn into self-harm. That can turn into cutting. That can turn into suicidal ideation. That is the severe depression that we often see in girls.
And it's because they know they're living a lie. And that doesn't make them feel good. And when they're successful in living the lie, then they start to believe, well, nobody really knows who I am. And then they become very isolated, and it leads to depression. And that's a bad place for a kid to get. But we have a lot of kids that are there. And social media and cell phones are not helping with this problem, right? Because then they can put out an image that makes them seem like they're over here, when in reality, they're a long ways away from that.
So how do we hold a space with a child that's in this mode? I think it's important that it's setting and saying, wow, you're doing like praise them for things that have nothing to do with performance. Praise them for things that have nothing to do with performance. That's what has to happen. And then also name it to tame it. Wow, you are so driven to get good grades, but I want you to understand I don't care and love you because you get A's. I'm okay if you get C's. I'm okay if you do, like, I want you to be happy because that's what we want with our kids. And so naming it to tame it and really pointing it out to recognize, like, so this is a really good slide in understanding a tune. Okay.
It's kind of no, we don't need to probably go through all of this. It's just kind of a review of what we have said with a tune, and maybe a good way to kind of remember some of it. So I don't think we need to go through all this again, but you can look at it and review kind of those main points.
Can we send it? We'll send this slide out to those. Oh, I guess we'll get the.
They're getting the yeah. When you guys will have a recording of this, you can come back to it, or you can take a picture of that slide. So we want to talk a little bit about ourselves. And by the way, we parent. And this is Jessica. She's 27. She's doing really well. She feels like all of us feel right now. I think, when we've had so many kids get contact traced and miss school, we've had all our kids' schools have been canceled for a few weeks on end. And lots of people we talk to are in the same place. They're having a homeschool, and it is a nightmare. And so one of the things we wanted to kind of share with you guys are, both of us are teachers. I've been a secondary teacher of 20 years. Stacey was an elementary teacher for almost 10 years. We are not our kids' teachers in the sense that we are not supposed to teach them all the things that their teacher at school would teach them. So if you have kids at home right now during this pandemic and they're getting overwhelmed, which I know you guys have kids that are feeling overwhelmed, all of our kids, when they come home and they have to do e-learning and they're trying to figure out their assignments and read emails and all that, it is not good for them. And so I think Stacey and I would give you guys permission to know that you do not have to be performance driven. You do not have to keep the school happy. You have to keep, look at the long-term effects of this on your kids, and it'll be okay for them to not get every assignment done. And it'll be okay for them to take some time to do some things differently, and not beat them up and beat yourself up because you feel like, oh, I'm a bad parent because I'm not getting my kids done on their schooling. That is okay to do that. We don't do it. We're teachers. And I mean, even last year I was teaching through the quarantine, and I'm like, our kids' stress levels were really high before, and then it's off the charts now. So don't beat them up when they don't get their schoolwork done, or they maybe don't get great grades. It's going to be okay.
And also, you guys set the limits. When I'm getting messages and hearing from parents whose elementary age children are doing Zoom for 4 to 6 hours, you guys, that is not how kids learn. That is, that much technology. You even look at the American Academy of Pediatrics and all of that. It's okay to be like, you know what, we're not doing it. We're not. Because this period of time when we talk about pandemic and the stress, it's not a normal period of time. And our schools were not designed to be online, but our children were not designed to be on technology that long. And so it's okay to opt out or to say, we'll do this, but we're not doing that.
And we would encourage you guys, focus. If you want to have them doing schoolwork, but then, the technology thing's a problem, whatever, focus on right-brained activities. Right-brained activities would be things that are creative, music, art, physical exercise. Left brain activities are more like scientific and analytical and problem solving. And some kids that might be what they really want, and that's fine. But right brain activities, because there's lots of right answers. If you ask a kid to paint a painting, there's no wrong answer. They do the best they can, and it should be fun. And so that's the difference between like left brain fill in the blank activities, right? Either you're right or wrong, and too often they're wrong. And then that reinforces the idea in their head that I'm stupid and I can't do it anyway. So you can take over your kids' education in some ways and take some of that pressure off yourself to keep the school happy.
Well, and I'm just going to throw this into, one of our children is college bound. One of our kids is incredibly gifted and smart, and he completely shut down with online learning. And guess what? We took an F as a family. And then we just said, here's your assignments from us. We want you reading this stuff in history. We want you doing this math with us. And we just said, we contact this school and we just said, he can't. Because his social emotional health was going to supersede the academics. And no one looks back at your junior high report card. If you're looking at a college that's looking back to a junior high report card, that's a crazy college, right? But no, it didn't matter. He's in junior high, and we needed his emotional health to be okay by the end of the pandemic. So we just said, and we didn't let him look at his grades. We didn't have him get online anymore. We gave him the assignments to do every day so that he could actually not have a complete nervous breakdown. So let's move forward one slide. Yep. We're going to move into what's called block trust. Okay. And this is when we're talking about that attachment cycle, this is the breakdown. All right. So the baby or the child expresses a need, right? And as the foster parent or the adopt parent or the parent, we see that need, and then we're going to try and interpret the need. And what happens at this arc up here is the child blocks trust. They block trust because they're blocking the pain of rejection. All right. And so we will see that happen, especially with children that are fostered or adopted, where we will see that flaming ball, and we're going to meet the need, and then we figure it out, but then they block the trust. Okay. So then what ends up happening is, as an adult, when every time I meet the need and I step into the sliding door and I'm holding the space, and it happens over and over and over again, physiologically, I'm going to start pulling away because I've been rejected over and over and over again. And what this looks like then is a parent or a mother or a father who's just meeting the need. Okay, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to make the breakfast in the morning. I'm going to get them off to school, or I'm going to respond in the way I'm supposed to. But we've lost the attunement component because we're pulling away because we've been rejected over and over and over again. Okay. And so we're doing all the things that a mom does, but we've lost the attunement because we've been rejected.
Yeah, it's all about rejection. Your kids are afraid of rejection, and then we become we don't like rejection either. And so, like, here's an example. You know, a kid comes home from school, you can tell they're upset. You know, they probably need a hug, they need some emotional relief. So you go up to them and you say, you know, I'm sorry you had a rough day, and you give them a hug. And what you hope is they go, thanks, mom, I love you too. But they don't, right? Then they just don't say anything, or they're still mad and they push you away. And like, you're trying to meet their needs, but they're not letting you. They're not accepting it. And that's what blocked trust looks like.
So, whoops. I do that every time. Sorry. I'm like technologically not savvy. When we're looking, when we're looking at blocked trust and blocked care. So the child will show blocked trust and we end up blocking care. Okay. And what happens is it becomes this cycle, right? Of, okay, block trust, block care, block trust, block care. And you guys start mirroring back things to each other. Okay. And so then we end up questioning as parents our own personal qualities. And then we feel ashamed and embarrassed. Right. And I've been in this space, you guys, where I'm like, I recognize like, oh my gosh, I'm just showing up every day and I'm tired. I'm showing up every day and I'm just tired, and I'm meeting the need because I'm getting nothing back, because attachment cycle is all about serve and return, serve and return, serve and return, serve and return. Okay. And so when I'm serving and serving and serving and I'm getting nothing back, then it gets old and I get exhausted and I get tired and I start breaking down.
And that's where then I think as a parent, and you know, I don't know if we've all been there, but I know Stacey, we're like, I don't even like my kids sometimes, right? Like that's what it feels like. I feel like I don't like them, right? I love my kids, but they're not emotionally connecting with me, and they're blocking the love and the trust, and it makes me feel like I don't like them.
Okay. And so why we want to share this is because this is normal. This is normal with our kids to feel this way. And what you have to do is, if we go back to that slide where we showed the flaming ball, okay, we're going to go back to the example of attunement. Okay, so here we have the child sends a behavior, the adult translate it. Well, when the adult translated the behavior, the child blocks at the bottom where it says response to the hidden feeling. The child blocking that. Okay, the cure for blocked trust and blocked care is that you as the adult have to have survival and self-care. You have to have other people feeding into you and supporting you, because you can't just have one relationship with your child that's just block trust, block trust, block trust. You have to be like, okay, I need a moment and I'm going to step back because I recognize I'm in this space where I'm just showing up, and I need to practice some survival self-care. And I need to talk to another adult so I don't feel like I'm a terrible person. Okay, go back to the. And so I want to give you guys some strategies for blocked trust. Okay, this is strategies for blocked trust. And this is helping your kid when they keep just basically saying, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be rejected. I'm going to block your trust. First, whenever you see the flaming ball of behavior, you're going to connect with the child before you attempt to correct the behavior. Okay. And remember, that's that holding the space, and that's using your body language to calm both brains. You're going to calm your own brain by taking breaths and being like, okay, I'm not going to react to this scary behavior. And then you're going to help calm their brain through breathing and helping them get to a space where you're like, okay, let's be able to talk about these emotions and behaviors.
And on a timeline, this doesn't have to be immediate. There can be some time between when the behavior, that flaming ball is launched, and when you connect. There can be some time in there, right? Sometimes we need that time. It takes time for both people to calm down before you can really connect. So don't feel like this is an urgency in that.
The next thing is you're going to reconnect and repair after there's been a breakdown. And we call this building islands of competence, right? So many times with our kids, we always are looking to fix what we think is broken. We're always going in to fix the deficits. We talk a lot about taking the things our kids are competent in and building on those. Look at your child's successes and achievements and build on those. What are they good at? So instead of being like, wow, they're really struggling with this, we need to fix and repair this. We look at, no, we need to actually look at their islands of competence and build on those.
And that's because if you have an internal narrative that's negative all the time, and everybody's just trying to help you get better at things you're bad at, you just get overwhelmed all the time and you get frustrated. And then you just feel like all I ever am is my failures instead of what you're good at. And like one of our kids a while back, we were talking, and this was during the spring semester, and he was quarantined and things were not going well. And like, I was just asking him, what are you good at? He couldn't give me an answer. Like, he is a smart kid, but he couldn't tell me anything positive about himself. And so all we're saying is, we've got to focus on the positivity. We've got to focus on the things that they're good at, and that's going to help them feel better. And when they feel better, they will behave better.
Well, and I'm just going to build on this a little bit, because when we took the F for our child and basically stopped online school, we decided that his schooling would be islands of competence. His schooling became, he loves historical books. He just read all these books on history. And then he loves some things with math and problem solving. So that's what we did. We built on islands of competence. And what's super interesting is this year, just 2 days ago, I asked him, hey, is there a teacher at junior high that you really like that you'd like me to get a gift for and a thank you? Okay, my son has picked the most crotchety, grumpy old teacher that is like no other kid likes, but my son loves him because he's the history teacher. And he has told my son, you are the smartest kid in my class. So here's this teacher that none of the other kids like because he's really grumpy, but my son loves him because he has built on an island of competence on him.
And I want to put it in another way. He makes my kid feel good. He makes my kid feel good. And when he feels good, he will be an amazing kid. When he feels bad, he's a hard kid. So I know, like, we just have to focus so much on the emotions. And that teacher, emotionally, he makes my kid feel better. And that's a really big deal for him.
Okay. One of the other things that we have done in our home, and it has been hugely impacting. So if there's one thing that you do with your kids after this, I would recommend creating touchstones. Okay. So remember when we talked about attachment process, a baby cries and the needs met, right? We're going back to that early childhood. Well, something also happens in early childhood called object permanence. And object permanence is the idea for a baby that when someone leaves the room and they cry, that someone comes back, that they exist beyond the room. Okay. And so that's built into a child when they are little, like before 18 months. And you'll see them do testing on young children. Well, they'll take a ball and they'll put it under something. And a child with object permanence will lift the blanket and find the ball. But a child that hasn't gotten that concept yet will think the ball has disappeared forever. Well, object permanence is built through the attachment process where a baby cries and the mom comes every single time. Right? Well, that moves into what we call social emotional permanence. That permanence is what we see as adults. When I disagree with my husband on something, say politics, or we get in a fight about something, we can have a fight or we can disagree, but I still believe that he loves me. I still know that he loves me. All right. Well, our kids struggle, a lot of them struggle with that social emotional permanence. So if something bad happens, or if they get a bad grade, or they get corrected in some way, then they believe, oh, you hate me, I suck, I'm stupid. Do any of you have kids that do this? Okay, that is called splitting. Okay, so that's a form of splitting, and our kids do that as a protective mechanism. All right, and they're doing that because they've already had abandonment or they've had loneliness and isolation. And so in order for me to not have like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like I basically am going to be like, okay, you hate me, we're done, no more.
This is so reinforced by social media, because as soon as you say anything on social media someone disagrees with, up, unfriend, right? Like I can just toss somebody to the side so easily. And so like our relationships, instead of overcoming challenges and maintaining relationships, we have become, I don't know what the right word would be, but we can get rid of a relationship and we can separate ourselves and feel like it's not a big deal.
So when we're looking at splitting in our kids, that protective mechanism, what can happen is if we don't help them with the splitting, it turns into a lot of times borderline personality disorder in adulthood. Okay. And all of this is stemming from that early attachment stuff. Right. And so when we, like, this is interesting. Reactive attachment disorder. Does anyone know, like, when you turn 18 or 19, you no longer are diagnosed reactive attachment disorder. It becomes borderline personality disorder. Okay. And reactive attachment disorder cannot be diagnosed unless neglect and trauma occurred before the age of 3. Okay. And so when we're looking at the splitting, and we see this in our kids, what we can do is create touchstones. And a touchstone is super simple to do. We just took, for one of our kids that does this, a photo book, and we put in all of what these touchstones or pictures of when he was successful or when we showed up as a family. So when he won the math award picture, when we went camping as a family, when we sat down to dinner around the table as a family, like all of these are just pictures through the years where that he felt good about himself and he felt loved by his family. Okay. And what that does is it gives a tangible physical representation for the mind to say, wait, no, my family does love me. I am a good person. I am successful. All right. And so,
well, I would put it this way. It helps them to recognize, okay, they've been loving me for a long time. It helps with the permanency idea, because now instead of they can't say, oh, you don't love me anymore. Well, because I can look back at these pictures and know you've been loving me for a really, really long time. And I have the evidence, and it brings back all these positive memories. It puts a smile on their face, and it brings them out of that negative cycle or spiral that they tend to get in.
And so what we do when we see the negative spiral, we will sit down on the couch and not say anything and just start looking through that flip book and be like, oh my gosh, I love this picture. They will come over and sit by you and you hand it to them and you just start looking through it again. Look through the book, because it helps them have that tangible thing. Because if you do any research with borderline personality disorder, one of the things they do is they do these touchstones, but they do them in mental pictures. So if I'm married and I have borderline personality disorder, a psychiatrist might have this mental flip book. Every time I get in a fight or feel like I'm splitting with him, then I'm going to go through and be like, oh, remember the time I was super sick and he cared for me? That's a mental picture I would have. Oh, remember that vacation? We had so much fun. He loved me so much. And it's basically this mental flip book that they'll have people have in their mind, so that when they go to that space of I'm not lovable, I'm stupid, and all those things, they actually have them go back to that flip book in their head. Well, our kids need something tangible.
So what we've done is we've used Shutterfly, and I just ordered a book the other day. Basically, we try to, at the end of the year, Black Friday, Shutterfly always has good deals. You just pile in, and you don't have to type in a lot. Like it's just, you just put in a bunch of pictures from the year. So like I just actually finished 2012. I missed this year. So I went back, went through all our pictures, camping pictures, birthday pictures, all those things. And we put those things together, and then we have these books that the kids, they go on for forever, right? They're always there, and they can always go back and look at when they were little and those positive memories.
Okay, so we're going to end with 2 slides because I realize we're getting close to the end of time. We're going to talk about strategies for blocked care. Okay, so we talked about for our kids strategies, but I want to talk about the strategies for us when we are having blocked care. Keep going. Keep going. First of all, I want you to recognize when you are pushed or when you see that blocked care, where do you go? Okay, so I'm going to tell you that when I look at this little picture, I definitely move into a place of overwhelming structure and wanting to, and consequence overdrive. I know where he goes, he tends to withdraw. So it's important to know what you do when you are pushed. And then also, what does your partner do? Where do they go when they're pushed? Because you have to recognize it in each other. And I will tell you that Darren, in a loving way, 2 nights ago, pointed it out, saying, honey, you are really stressed out. And I know what I do, but he recognized it and is like, what can we do? What measures can we put in place? Because I wasn't having quality sleep and I wasn't having survival care. And so he recognized in me that I was going into the consequence overdrive. And he said, okay, what can we do to get better sleep for you? But also, why don't you go for a run tomorrow? All right. So that's what's important is, remember we talked about that's the cure for blocked care, is that you have to have survival care, but you also have to have all those other things: clear boundaries, family routine, structure, quality sleep, support.
And I would remind everybody the slide we looked at a while ago about being honest. And it really helps to have somebody who knows you really well, who you can talk to and say, man, I am struggling. And, when you share your emotions that way, it really helps us to overcome and make it through those challenging times. So the other thing is, if you know somebody and they say that to you, man, I'm just struggling. Well, it just sometimes means they need somebody to listen. They don't need you to solve all their problems. They just need you to listen. And then instead of focusing on the problem, focus on the solution, right? Like I recognize, Stacey's stressed out. The holidays are challenging. Our kids act kind of crazy during the holidays. And we have this 4 or 5 days in a row. Our kids have been home. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And so instead of focusing on the signs of her stress, it's focus on the solution. Hey, let's do something that helps to overcome it. And I think we can all, if we learn those things, we have friends that can help us with those. It's really powerful.
So we're going to put it on this last slide, which I think while we go through it, if you guys have any specific questions, we'll answer some. But the other thing for blocked care is learn to recognize your body signs of stress. Remember that wheel? Recognize that, fill that in, really look at that and understand. Set limits and learn to say no. There are things that my kids can't handle. Like, we don't leave our house a lot. We do a lot of stuff here because my kids cannot handle that kind of it's almost like we set ourselves up for success instead of failure. Because if I go to every holiday party with my family, it will not go well. I will be upset. They will be upset. So we're just very boring in some ways during the holidays. So learning to say no. And then also self-care. I used to be like, oh my gosh, self-care. I hate massages. I don't like pedicure, like all those things. Well, what I recognized is someone told me, Stacey, if self-care feels bad to you, that's not your self-care. I don't know where I got it in my head that self-care was supposed to be a bubble bath, which I hate. That's not my self-care. My self-care is literally going for runs and punishing my body. That's how I feel like I get rid of stress. So if self-care feels bad, then it belongs to someone else. It's not your self-care. So create time for yourself for survival. Let's look at the chats. Are there any questions? I know that was a ton. let's see, we said, how do we find sliding door moments with kids who express a lot of apathy? I'm fine, lack of enthusiasm. I am so glad, Sarah, you asked that question, because those are sliding door moments where this is what I would do. I would go and I would just tell this child, hey, you know what? I am going to give you every day for 15 or 20 minutes, you pick out the amount of time you have at this time, and I'll make up a name. This is Susie's time. Every day, Susie, from, and like I said, you pick a time that works for you from 8 to 8:20. That is Susie's time. And I just need to be able to spend time with you. And if you want to be in your room, that's fine. I'm just going to sit over here. And even, I'm going to tell you, they're probably going to ignore you for a few days, right? They might even sit there and be like super annoyed that you're in their room, but just say, I need this because I care so much about you. And I want to hear about your day. I want to do whatever you want to do. And even if they're like rejecting you or blocking you, you're just going to sit there. And what you're going to see happen is eventually they're going to be like, wow, my mom really wants to spend time with me. And they're going to start opening up in some way, right? And you just have to like hold the space, even if it's a rejected space. And you're basically preloading that care to say, I want to hear from you. I want to be in this moment with you, because kids that have apathy or who are shut down, like they are needing you to sit in that space with them, just like the kid that is blowing all the emotions in your face. All right. Do you want to add to that at all?
So teenagers, right? This is where we have to learn to speak like a foreign language. I would suggest your 14-year-old probably has things that they really like doing that you probably would really not like doing, right? Like they like playing video games, or they like, I don't know, Instagram or whatever that your kid is gravitating to that they like. Go and do that with them, right? Like, so you're going to communicate to them, I just want to spend time with you, and I'm willing to do what you want to do, not what make you do what I want to do. So if you want to play Minecraft, show me how you play. And like if you express an interest in what they are interested in and what they like, they're going to look at you like you're crazy, because that's not normal. Like then if you get them, that you start kind of that door opening, and then sometimes all of a sudden they won't shut up. They'll just keep talking because they're excited that you're expressing an interest in something that they're good at, even if you are like on the inside going, I'm not a Minecraft person, this is boring to me. But it's a way to connect with your kid. And so like instead of trying to get them to come to you, you just have to go to them and express that interest, and hopefully they open the door and you can build some quality time together, and then let that just grow over time. So good question, because teenagers are tough.
Teenagers are fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being with us today. We really enjoy doing these trainings and stuff, and we may be able to do some of these in the future. So any comments or feedback, you guys can send us an email. You should have a copy of this emailed to you, I think, a recording. So thanks for being here today.
And hopefully you took something from this and are able to build in some survival care during the holidays.
You guys take care.